Good morning. I'm Jay Maynard, candidate for City Council from Ward 1. And this morning I'd like to talk to you a bit about the charter amendments, and specifically in response to Brittany Kowecki's video from last night, where she says that she doesn't understand how anybody could vote against them and would like to hear people's rationale. Well, okay, this is my rationale. I'm going to stop and start this video several times because, frankly, I have a cough left over from a cold a few weeks ago, and I don't think I need to make you guys listen to it. First off, let's talk about the amendments as a whole. Ms. Kowecki points out that the Charter Commission put a lot of work into the charter amendments, and therefore we should adopt them because we shouldn't waste all that hard work. Well, except for one minor detail, and that is that hard work does not make anything acceptable if it wasn't to begin with. You can put all the work you want to in a mud pie, and when you're done, you still have a mud pie, which you can't eat. And the Charter Commission's amendments are in that category. They put a lot of work into what are fundamentally bad ideas. And because they're bad ideas, the citizens of Fairmont should reject them as a whole. Ms. Kowecki also makes a lot of the fact that these amendments were adopted by large majorities of the Charter Commission. And they were. I can't argue that. It's a fact. But those 9-3 and 8-4 and 7-2 majorities were produced largely because a few members of the commission are frankly flat out bullies. And they bullied people off the commission who disagreed with their approach. And they kept doing it, and they did it over a period of years until they finally got a commission that would do what they wanted them to do. I don't believe that 9-3 majority is representative of the citizens of Fairmont as a whole. Fortunately, the Commission is not the final arbiter of this decision. The voters of Fairmont are. And I believe the voters of Fairmont on November 8th will tell the Commission, no, you went down the wrong track. So let's talk about the amendments themselves. The First Amendment changes the City Council from 4 members elected from 4 wards and 1 member elected at large to 5 members elected from 5 wards. The Commission's argument is that the current structure allows 3 members to be elected from 1 ward, and that is somehow unfair. Well, it is based in a fundamental fallacy. And that fallacy is that a member elected from a ward, even if they are elected to an at-large position, still primarily represents that ward. And that's simply incorrect. When I was running, or started to run, for the at-large seat 2 years ago, I knew that I wasn't getting elected to represent Ward 1. I was getting elected to represent all the citizens of Fairmont. Michelle Miller, the current at-large seat holder, knew the same thing. She and I had that conversation. And the mayor certainly represents all the citizens of Fairmont. But not only that, the city charter requires that all of the ward council members represent the interests of the city at large as well. And so their fallacy is all the way down. It's wrong on every level. And so it doesn't really matter what ward the mayor or the at-large council member are elected from. They still represent all of the city, as do all of the council members. What this amendment does is it does raise costs for the city because it adds another set of election judges. And it also would force us to rent a second place to hold elections from because the Knights of Columbus Hall is not large enough to hold 10 polling places, which is what would happen under this change. So it's based on a fallacy, and it would increase costs for the city and really not gain us anything. It might change the composition of the council I personally believe that this came about because one particular person got tired of losing council elections. But in the end, this amendment would cause harm to the city and expense to the city and produce really no beneficial result. The second proposal would amend the form of government in the city charter from mayor-council plan to weak mayor-council plan. And the commission's argument is that this is just a clarification. Well, so I looked at the city charters of a large number of charter cities around Minnesota. About half of them don't contain any statement like this at all. And the other half, with exactly one exception, all say mayor-council plan. They don't think that clarification is needed. Why do we? And the answer is that the Charter Commission has, throughout its process, treated the mayor and the city administrator and the city attorney as the enemy. And this is nothing more than a thinly veiled shot at a mayor that they dislike. The Third Amendment proposes that the mayor shall be prohibited from serving as liaison to boards or commissions. And Ms. Kawecki complains that the mayor self-appointed herself. And the charter doesn't allow that, and so she wants to make that explicit. And the Charter Commission's rationale is that the commissions at all are a legislative function, and the mayor has and should have no legislative power. What all these arguments miss is that the city council members or mayor who are appointed to various commissions do so strictly in a liaison capacity. And they do so that should the decisions of those commissions be appealed to the council, that council member or mayor can act as liaison and bring that commission's proposal before the council and explain its rationale. There are several, pretty fair number of commissions and boards around the city. I serve on two of them. And there's a lot of work involved for each council member in doing so. And if for some reason there is no council member wishing to serve as liaison to a specific board or commission, the mayor has in the past, although she doesn't this term, serve in that role. And I see nothing wrong with that because it is not legislative. It is strictly a liaison position. It's strictly communication. And so, again, this is another shot at a mayor that the commission majority dislikes. The fourth proposal would allow any individual city council member to, quote, open an inquiry, unquote, into city affairs without requiring the city council start an investigation by a majority vote. This I refer to as the loose cannon amendment. We have in the past had individual council members go off on their own, half-cocked, to dig into city affairs based on animosities and grudges. And this amendment would legitimize doing exactly that. It is noteworthy that Ms. Kawecki thinks that it's important to force the city administrator to respond to any amount of inquiries that she may send her, when Ms. Kawecki herself is responsible for sending much more than 10 times the amount of questions and inquiries to the city administrator of the rest of the city council put together. One wonders exactly what her goal is. And so this amendment would legitimize that and allow her to be a loose cannon without restraint, and especially without the restraint of the remainder of city council. This is a really bad idea because it allows an individual council member to use up city resources and take city time and cost city taxpayers money for reasons that of personal animosity or of representing a small group with a large grudge. The fifth proposal would amend the city charter to write a very long job description for the city administrator into the charter. I agree with Ms. Kawecki that the city council should be out to hire the best city administrator they can. But this long job description, complete with a detailed requirement for one of a very few specific college degrees, is way beyond what is necessary to ensure that. The Charter Commission, during discussion of this proposal, was told by one member that the League of Minnesota Cities recommended this and that other cities had it in their charter. And no, that is not correct. I also reviewed that section of other charter cities' charters, and not one had anything more than what we currently have in it. The League of Minnesota Cities recommends those qualifications as something for city councils to consider when hiring an administrator, but does not recommend that they be written into the charter for very good reasons. The charter is hard to change, and as educational degrees and what education is available and provided change, the charter would have to change to accommodate that, and we all see just how hard it is to get that done. And further, this amendment ties the hands of the city council in its search for a good administrator candidate. During the discussion on this proposal, which, by the way, my opponent for council was the one to propose, I asked, so if we have somebody who has been a successful businessman in the city and has run a successful and growing and thriving business and a major employer in this city, and he wants to retire and serve the city for a few years as administrator, and he knows all the people, he's well liked and he's well respected, and everybody knows who he is and gets along with him and can work with him, but his degree's in electrical engineering. Now, I would be more than happy to hire somebody like that as city administrator. But my opponent says, nope, we need somebody who's educated out of college and dealing with cities. Well, these days the only education you get out of college is a degree in woke studies, no matter what the stated major is. And so we need the flexibility to hire somebody who is a good leader and a good administrator without nailing them down to any specific college education. The sixth proposal would amend the city charter to require that the administrator's contract be written for a fixed term instead of an indefinite term. Ms. Kawecki calls that a win-win, but she is simply incorrect. The contract for city administrators almost universally is written for an indefinite term. This would be a highly unusual provision and would limit the applicant pool for city administrators greatly. And so it would make hiring a city administrator much harder and lower the quality of those that we could hire. So this is not a win for the city of Fairmont. It's also not a win for the administrator because it implies that their contract can only be negotiated at the end of that fixed term instead of at any time, as is the case now. So this amendment is nothing more than yet another power grab to disadvantage a city administrator the commission majority dislikes. The seventh proposal would require the city council to hold an annual review of the city administrator. This is not a good idea for two reasons. First off, they're already doing it, and it's best practice, and it's what every employer does for every employee. But what it does imply is that the council could not hold a review of the city administrator at any other time. You would think that Ms. Kawecki would think about that since she initiated a review of the city administrator not long after she came to the council and in fact well outside what would have been the annual review period. But she did it anyway, and now she wants to mandate an annual review. Well, so she wants to get in the way of her own work. So what we're doing is we're casting best practice into the concrete of the city charter where it doesn't need to belong. Again, this is an administrative requirement, not one that should be forced on anybody because we're doing it already. The eighth proposal would require that the city clerk be appointed by the administrator and approved by the city council. This has one glaring omission in it, and that is if the city council has to approve it, does the city council has to approve her firing, her raises, her performance reviews? The amendment doesn't say. And so effectively what it means is that the city clerk, instead of one boss, now has, depending on how you look at it, either two bosses or six. Now, I don't know about you, but having more than one boss is, for me, a very bad thing to do. And I think it's bad for any employee of any organization, city or otherwise. But the Charter Commission bowled ahead with it and decided that that's how things would be done, so here we are. This amendment is of a piece with the rest of them, attempting to take shots at a city administration that the Charter Commission majority dislikes. The last two amendments are said to be required to comply with state statute. I have no particular opinion about the ninth proposal. I can see value in allowing the city to move more quickly than 3 days between first proposal and adoption of an ordinance. In the recent manure ordinance is a case in point. There, the city council had to have a special meeting to finally adopt that because it did not fall into the category of emergency ordinance. But I can also see value in having a delay so the citizens can weigh in before final adoption. The 10th Amendment is one I authored, and what it would do would be remove redundant language from the charter and remove a monetary limit from the charter that is lower than that specified in state statute. Instead, it would have the city's bid process conform to state statute. We're doing that already in practice, but the charter needs to be updated to reflect that. Indeed, the Charter Commission complains about not having met for 30 years and lots of things need updating. Well, yeah, there are things that need updating because the underlying state laws have changed in that period of time. But except for the 10th proposal, not one of them falls into the category of things that change just because the times changed. Finally, a note, the Charter Commission in last week's Photo Press published a front-page political ad advocating for the adoption of all these amendments. They claim it's informative, but under Minnesota law, it is campaign material because it is intended to influence the way people vote at a general election. I believe that the Charter Commission, which, by the way, operates off of city money and therefore your taxpayer dollars, has spent those taxpayer dollars on political advertising. I believe that is highly inappropriate of it. Not only that, but they published their ad over the list of names of the Charter Commission members, whether or not they agreed with it, agree with the content. The ad itself was placed without bringing it before the Commission for approval. As such, that ad was placed over my name. I object to this very strenuously. As I've explained, I don't support their rationale for these amendments and would have disagreed and not permitted them to use my name to promote their proposals. I call on the citizens of Fairmont to vote against all of the first 8 amendments and use your conscience on amendments 9 and 10. Thank you.